We've all heard the saying that with great power comes great responsibility, and while that may sound like a cliche platitude, Spider Man films have for years made it a staple tagline, and things are no different here in the latest Marvel Cinematic Universe flick, Spider Man No Way Home. Said immediately after 2019's Far From Home, where everyone's friendly neighborhood Spider Man has become a pariah after the death of Mysterio, and Peter Parker has been revealed as the controversial vigilante's true identity. This sets up a surprisingly relatable and grounded in reality conflict that not only affects Peter's future as he tries to enter the next stage of his life post high school and post Endgame, but also those closest to him, such as MJ, Ned, and his Aunt May. Their lives are chaotic and plagued by unwanted attention and a looming angry mob of lunatics and media personnel, so pretty much a giant physical embodiment of Twitter. In response to this predicament, he seeks the help of Doctor Strange to cast a spell in which the entire world forgets who Spider-Man is, but things soon go completely awry when a group of insane villains from alternate universes break through looking to settle their individual scores with Spider-Man, each of them from the decently sized library of Spider-Man theatrical features. This was easily my favorite part of Spider-Man No Way Home. While I wasn't really a fan of either of Mark Webb's amazing Spider-Man films, the first two parts of Sam Raimi's trilogy were a big part of my childhood and remain two of my favorite superhero films ever. What I like about this was how true it stayed to the original versions of these characters, while still having a bit of comedic fun with the crossover properties. Because Raimi and Webb created much darker worlds than the one in which the MCU is set, these bad guys have a very cartoonish and bombastic impression of their new surroundings because, well, the MCU is a pretty cartoonish and bombastic place. They have often funny but tasteful and realistic reactions to the world and people they don't recognize. I've usually never cared for Marvel's self-referential humor, nor have I ever considered it to be in a Doctor Strangelove tier of comedy in general, but I was very much delighted by what they did here and was never bothered when a joke or two would run a little longer than necessary. I was also glad they kept so much of what made these characters fleshed out in their original films. Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Sandman, Lizard, and Electro are all brought back with their original actors, but it's done with so much more to offer than just nostalgia candy. These villains receive new closures that matches those of the originals, albeit in an ultimately happier conclusion. My favorite was definitely Dr. Octopus, whose art from Spider-Man 2 has to be one of the most compelling birth-to-death stories of a villain ever. I definitely get people's sympathy for Thanos, but I don't think there has ever been a more tragic and ultimately redemptive villain than Alfred Molina's Otto Octavius at the very end of that film. And it's not just the baddies who get to shine in Spider-Man No Way Home. It's still Tom Holland's movie after all, and when it focuses on Spider-Man maturing and coming to terms with his identity and the crucial decision he has to eventually make for the greater good, the movie reaches some really powerful high notes. The MCU's version of Spider-Man has mostly skirted by on the character's pop culture appeal and recognizability, but in No Way Home, I finally felt like Peter Parker had officially joined the likes of Tony Stark and Steve Rogers as a truly compelling lead hero. In its darkest hour, this movie takes an unexpected turn that I didn't think the lighthearted incarnation of this character would ever have the courage to take, and yet I'm glad it did. After the movie's fantastic climax, everything from this character's old life is at last in the rear view, which is the solution to the problem I had with Far From Home, a movie I felt couldn't decide whether to move forward from previous phases in the franchise or hold on with Peter as he tries to move on without Iron Man in his life. I really loved Spider-Man No Way Home, a fully packed, tightly wound adventure with good laughs and extremely well done action sequences. I also approve of how they made Peter's friends part of the actual storyline instead of just making them extensions of it, like in the previous film. Simultaneously enthralling, funny, and emotionally hefty, No Way Home is the perfect MCU flick for Spidey fanatics, as it shamelessly but lovingly pours on the fan service nice and heavy. Almost the entire audience I saw this movie with cheered the second a certain you already know who showed up, and it brought a big smile to my face as well. In a time when remakes, reboots, franchises, spin-offs, and belated sequels have overrun cinemas, Spider-Man No Way Home is nostalgia in its purest state and done almost completely right. It isn't used in this film to fill in a lack of substance because this movie has plenty of that. This has to be my number one favorite Spider-Man in the MCU thus far, my second favorite live-action Spider-Man after Spider-Man 2, and my third favorite overall if you throw 2018's animated into the Spider-Verse between them. I give it a 3.5 out of out of 4. Thank you for watching.